How's that? The results are in. Brett, you are here. You are in the house. How you doing?
Good, mate. How are you?
I'm doing really well. Before we get started, because I'm always interested in people, their personalities, their background, their history. Nice to see you here sitting comfortably in the lounge here.
There we go.
Have you ever done a time management course?
No.
No, I didn't think so. Just so everyone knows that we get some sort of understanding, is that we planned this on going on at 11 o'clock, which we did. Mm-hmm. Perfect. We made it on time. What time did you get here?
Probably 10:56.
You did. You walked in here at 10:56, and I would have just continued. I would have just gone, oh, well, he's not here, so I'll just...
You would have gone live anyway.
I would have just gone live, and I would have brought up everything about you. So, look, before we get started, great to have you here. I think we've been planning on doing this for, I don't know, years.
7 years?
Maybe, something like 7 years. But it's good to have you in finally sitting opposite me, because I know I did one of these the other day, and it's a little bit difficult when you have somebody that's living 150 miles away. Why do we still say miles?
Oh, I don't know.
But let's have a look at who this person is. Brett O'Connor from Inception Network, a bootstrap startup. So that always looks interesting to me. So you've got some good followers there. I see that you also follow the Institute for Learning Professionals.
Yep.
But I'm always interested in seeing maybe the last thing that you maybe had posted up there. Let's have a look. Brett O'Connor says, put together the old-fashioned way with a bit of help from AI, of course. But it also helps to be dyslexic and have OCD when you put together an ebook these days. Feedback from proofreaders is also welcomed, but you have to tell me also what skill set comes under the proof that you actually read and understand. So what happened here? Tell me about what's going on with this thing here. Why did you put this up here?
Well, this is something that I been working on for a while now with Dennis Hall from the Business and Jobs Expo brand. And he wrote a book called If 70 is the New 50, When Do I Get to Retire? So checks in the mail, Dennis, if you're watching.
I think I have that book behind me. I do. I've got the book behind me.
I was going to bring in one of Jenny Gorman's one that she autographed for me and bring in for you. But
wasn't Jenny Gorman a lovely lady? And we say wasn't she? She passed away maybe 2 years ago.
Yeah.
We had some good conversations with her.
Yeah.
She wrote some great stuff around, what is your purpose? And we had a good conversation with her.
Awesome authenticity.
Awesome authenticity. Yeah, and I think the way that Jenny, displays herself and the way that she, talks about authenticity is good. But she's not here, but we did have a last conversation with her, and I might just put this up here on the screen. It's just got here. Feel free to ask Brett any questions in the chat box. You're happy to answer anything.
Yeah, God help us, we're going live.
Well,
if you know Gerald and I. Yeah.
Who knows what questions can come up. So let's go right to the beginning. Why did you start Inception? What is it about? To me, it sounds like a movie. It sounds like a really exciting movie, actually. Tell me, way back when, firstly, what was your school life like?
My school life was like, I had a occupational therapist describe their ideal customer and all the problems that they were having and everything else, and I went, wow, so basically you're looking for me at school. To give you an idea of that sort of thing, how my school life was. It wasn't pleasant. I was an introvert, struggled to make friends, but I got into sport. So it was a case that, when I was at school, I basically decided that didn't know what I wanted to do. Got along well with my woodwork teacher, so I went to Teachers College in Sydney to study that.
The old Teachers College.
So, I guess that's how I got into, still doing teaching, but more say training these days. Yeah. But family of school teachers and farmers. So I guess that was the two options to me, and I'm afraid of spiders, so I wasn't much good on the farm. But went down there and started to get into business because it wasn't successful at uni. Got on the social committee and started organising events for them, and they built a bar in the first year that I was there, and they gave me the keys to it. Yeah. At their own peril, I guess. And I was living on campus, and, they worked out that I wasn't going real well at it, and they said, well, you might want to look at doing something else. And a friend of the family was the shopping centre manager at Castle Towers, and he gave me a job driving a lift up and down all day when I was at uni. Got into business from there. Got a job running in one of the Donut Kings, and then ended up buying a franchise when I was 21, taking it out of the franchise group in Westfield Westfield, and that's basically how I got into business. I kind of fell into it.
Do you enjoy a good donut every now and then?
Well, when you get known as the donut puncher to the local guys at the pub, then you tend to pull away from it.
Sorry, you got known as the what?
Well, yeah, that was the guy. The guys from the pub used to come up to the movies because it was right next door to the movies where the Donut King where I worked. And then when I would go up to the pub, I would sort of sling them some free donuts, and they would come and say, "Oh yeah, this is the donut puncher. Give him a drink and all this sort of stuff." So it wouldn't happen these days, but
I'm so glad that we clarified the donut puncher. It makes a lot of sense. So you worked in a donut shop. Somebody gave you an opportunity. At what stage did you think that this was a business, and how did you come up with the name? So why did you start the business, and why was this really important for you?
Well, it come down to, what is, they talk about startup and everything else, but business inception is about when people first get the idea. And yeah, it is like the movie, and for some people you've got to go back 3 or 4 levels to actually find out what they love. And this is the whole thing of Dennis's book, is that, when you get to retire, well, if you're willing to keep doing what you love and people are willing to pay for it, why would you retire?
Yeah.
And this is where people get to 50, and a lot of men that, I'm turning 50 next year. There's a lot of people I know that get to that age and they go, am I going to let a 17-year-old kid tell me what to do for the rest of my life? Which is they leave school, they go to uni, and they go through the same sort of process that I do. But now I'm sort of looking back, well, what do I want to do for the next 30 years of my working life? And that's going back to when I left uni and I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I looked at getting into running businesses and starting businesses, and I've had a lot of experience with that, opening stores and businesses, but it's more about finding, people doing what they love, looking after the staff so that you don't have to keep, hiring and retraining. Yeah.
What if there's a 17-year-old sitting out there now and says they got just really offended and triggered by you saying you don't want a 17-year-old telling a 50-year-old what to do? What if that 17-year-old has got some knowledge and intelligence that could probably, I don't know, maybe give you a hand or a help up?
Well, this is what I'm finding is most people that want to start a business, a lot of them are over 50, and the average age of a business owner now is 50. What I'm getting is there's a big over 65 startup market, and they want to start up businesses to employ their grandkids, the 17-year-old kids that are leaving school, because they don't see that they've got the same opportunities and people don't listen to them. Now, there's school kids that are starting businesses these days. They've got the Vet in Schools program where they're doing, diploma of businesses at school, but they're not actually starting businesses up. But when they go, now that it's a case that only 6% of businesses are owned by people over under 30. So that's actually halved from what it was in the 80s when I started looking at working and getting into business.
Yeah.
So it's a case that that's one of the demographics where people that are 17, I would say to them, well, get out and try stuff, because how do you know what you love until you try it?
Yeah.
And, that's what I'd say to them. If you want to go and do something, go and do it. Talk to Gary Vee and he'll say, if you want to learn how to sell, start selling. And they say, well, but what do I sell? And it's like, well, what do you buy? What do you look? What are you interested in?
Good point.
And that's what I say to my Cert 4 marketing students, international students, when they come in, and they'd all go, oh, but I don't know anything about marketing. And I said, but you've been a customer, so you've been marketed to. What do you think marketing is about? They want you to market to customers. So with social media and everything these days, you can always find someone that's interested in the same thing as you. A lot of people might use it as escapism. That's probably why they log onto your channel.
Yeah, true.
But at the end of the day, if you're filling their need, which is their need for something else or to explore the world and do that sort of thing, then that's how I find that a lot of people get into business, is they actually find something they love and then they go, well, hang on, someone's willing to pay me for that. And if they don't start their own business, then they can always get a job with a small business because they want someone that's got a bit of an understanding of what it takes to run a small business. So they're looking at employing the 17-year-olds that want to start a business, and they probably got all the great ideas and everything else. But when I started business, I was working with one of the directors of Donut King, which is now Retail Food Group. He had to co-sign the lease with me to get me to buy the shop because Westfield wouldn't let me just come in and buy a shop. And he said to me, what we say to our franchisees is for the first 6 months, don't come to us with any new ideas because we've probably already thought of it. So what did I do? I came in and I gave him all these new ideas and all this sort of stuff. So I went through that sort of situation, and what he was trying to say to me was that you're paying for this system. So why don't you learn the system, learn why we do it, and learn our why and the how to do it. And then in the what-if situations, when you get something new, come to us and say, well, what if this happens? And then we'll start talking about that. And he said usually that would take 6 months for a business owner.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of people don't have that patience when they're starting up a business. They want it all happen now and all this sort of stuff. So, yeah.
So tell me... we talk a lot about, if we can give advice to the young people coming up, this is what I would probably give them, a heads up in, or here's a nice new strategy. But what about older people? What about the 50-year-old, 55, 60-year-old, those people who have got all that knowledge and intelligence and they got the wisdom? What sort of advice could you give them? And I know a lot of your international students, they range from different ages, don't they? So when you say international, we're thinking everywhere from China, India, Pakistan, Afghanistan. We're talking everywhere, aren't we?
Yeah, South America.
South America. Yeah, okay, yeah. So if we think about, all right, what advice could you give, say, the people who are nearing the end of their working life, but they say, I've still got a good 10 years in me. I've still got a good 10 years. I'm not too sure if I want to start a business, but now listening to Brett, I'm thinking that maybe this is the way that I should go. What would you suggest to them?
Well, I guess they've got a lot more in common than what they think. They've certainly got a lot more in common with people their grandchildren's age, even if they don't have grandkids, than what they do with people my age. And this is what I find, that people from 35 to 50 are the least represented groups in social media. The biggest growing group in social media is grandparents, because they want to connect with their grandkids. But that actually gives them more technology skills than they really need to run a business these days. If they can use Facebook, if they can send emails, if they can use Microsoft Word or even two-finger touch type. Yeah. They've got more skills than a lot of web developers out there, I know. They don't have the formatting skills in Word and all that sort of stuff. So when they learn that, we put them through an 8-week process, and by week 4 they're writing a business plan and they're doing their business. The first thing we do is skills recognition. It's no longer about hard or soft skills. It's about recognising life skills, and now it's all about thinking skills, action skills, and personal skills. Now, action skills is getting overtaken by AI and all this sort of stuff, automation. Thinking skills, you've still got to think for the AI, so you've got to put the prompts in there. So that's the strategy, which a lot of older people have, that the younger kids don't have. But they've got the action skills, so they actually match up. So what you need is personal skills, which is where Dennis's specialty is, where you need to see what the capabilities are of the olders and the youngers, and you kind of like mediate between the two. So, they might get frustrated and all this sort of thing, but I'm finding that kids coming out of school would rather work with their grandparents than they would with their parents. Yeah. And they've got that in common with their grandparents, because their kids probably don't listen to them anymore, and their parents don't listen to the kids, or the kids don't listen to the parents, and that sort of angst is going in there. But I've had a lot of people that have said they've got kids with ADHD and autism and all this sort of stuff, and they're like, can you get them a job? And I get them a job with one of their friends' businesses, and they go, but they won't work with me. But then they start learning all these skills and learning how to use Facebook for business and this sort of stuff, because then they actually, the kids today coming out, they've grown up with the technology. They're the first to get onto a social platform. They're also the first to leave it as well. So they go bouncing around and everything else like that. But the fact of the matter is Facebook's the biggest one. We're working with Facebook certified marketers and all this sort of stuff. But now the technology, and with ChatGPT, my marketing students have been using AI for 5 years and handing in assessments and all this sort of stuff.
Is that right?
It's just a natural part of the industry. So how we got around this sort of thing is we tapped into their life skills, and they were new to the country. Now, guess what? When you're new to a country, you pick up all these wonderful things, and they ask all these questions. Why do Australians do this? Why do Australians do that? And I've never thought about it until I started teaching international students. And
can you give me an example? Like when they say, why do Australians do this? Give me an example.
One of the things is before they come over here, their agents say, no, it's not Australia, it's Australia. Pronounce it Australia. Yeah.
Really?
So I actually had a friend that started up an international student educational agency, migration agent, and he called it Australia Education. Because there's stuff like this, because they're trying to say to them, okay, yes, they speak English, but you need to get used to the fact that they have a different, I guess, dialect and the colloquialisms and all this sort of stuff. And this is where when people employ someone that's an overseas VA in the Philippines or something like that, they go on about, it's because it's not English. It's not English. And this is what my international students is. English isn't the problem. If an Australian doesn't understand something, they say, well, what do you mean? Or they ask you to repeat it. And that's whether they speak English or they're struggling with the accent. But they've actually said to me that they find that when people hear an accent in Australia, they ask, where are you from? And they start talking about the person, not about the skills and this sort of stuff. And this is where I'm finding that, people don't care what you know until they know how much you care. So this is where I'm finding that with a lot of older people, when they start asking questions about the kids and what are you doing? And I don't ask what training they need. I say, how can I make your life easier? And a lot of the times they talk about problems with their kids or their cats, or if the problem with their dogs, I'll send them to you. But they then tell you what they need training in, and you just go, well, why don't you just do that? And they go, well, I don't know how.
Right.
And I go, well, do you want me to show you? Oh, yeah, I'm interested in that. And a lot of time it's not the money that they can make from it, it's what they can do with that money that's their why. And this is when you're doing a lot of training with job seekers and, even the people that do the funded training, and unemployment's low, but there's a lot of underemployment and this sort of stuff as well. There was 200,000 retirees that came back to work last year after COVID because there's now more flexible work arrangements, a lot more remote work and everything else. But it's caused other issues with bigger businesses where there's 42,000 jobs advertised for clerical and admin staff. So businesses aren't going overseas to the VA businesses because it's cheap. They're going over there because there's simply not enough in Australia to do it. And when I talk to older people, they've been working in offices and this sort of thing for 20 years. Now they can get $50 an hour working as a VA. Well, they're getting paid for 2 hours work, but it only takes them half an hour because they've got the experience to do it. So they're actually getting a pay rise by going back to work and charging for outcomes and not per hour. And this is why a lot of them are actually interested in starting a business. So. If
I can ask you, like you were mentioning about your international students, it must have been a terrible time that you'd gone through during that 2-3 year period of COVID where there was no international travellers allowed to come into Australia. How did you cope during that period? So what was, we could simply jump on here and do a whole lot of Zoom calls, but how did you cope with your business, which is more about bringing the international students in? What were you doing?
Well, this is where I was already working remotely in marketing and consulting and training and doing online training. But the college that I was working with, they had to, legally, they could only do 1/3 of their course online. Previously, they had to turn up to class as part of their visa. Otherwise, they get kicked out for attendance. So for me, it wasn't an issue going online, but there was a lot of people in the organisation that struggled. But here's the thing with vet qualifications. Yes, we had 900,000 international students at the start of COVID. That went back to 450,000 basically in 3 or 4 months. Now, the ones that were onshore, the tourists and that didn't want to go home, they actually couldn't afford to go to uni, but they could afford to stay in the country and go to vet qualifications. So my Cert 4 and the college that I was working at went from 600 students to 750 students with the borders closed.
Wow.
So, but universities basically went down to nothing. The English language courses went down to nothing because when you got onshore enrolments, they don't need to enrol in English language courses to get their level up to do their vet skills. But we had people from the US and people from Canada and all this sort of thing in my class as well, and they were struggling more because they felt that they should get it, and because they speak English and all this sort of stuff. And this was what my international students were saying to me. They felt comfortable coming into my class and being the idiot in the room, because I would do that with them and ask them the stupid questions about their country. And it would be a bit of a joke and all this sort of stuff. But it got to the stage where I didn't actually pick up that someone had an accent. So I was talking to someone in the street and they would say, oh, that guy, he had an Asian accent. And I wouldn't remember who it was, because that's who I was talking to during COVID, was everyone had an accent.
Right.
And this was right after when I was delivering the Diploma of Leadership and Management. And they had to do a presentation, and it was right, 2 weeks after the Prime Minister said, well, international students that can't support themselves, well, maybe they should just go home. And I actually was doing a presentation and I was asking them having the difficult conversations with them, what do you think about that? And they were like, well, we live in Mexico. There's no direct flights from Australia to Mexico, so we can't go home. We're stuck here. Yeah. And it was kind of like a human rights crisis almost for them, because they were losing their jobs in the cafes and restaurants. Yeah. They didn't get any Centrelink or any government support. And I asked them the question, I said, so, the government's got these payments for people on Job Seeker and everything else, and they're getting paid, so that's actually creating jobs for you. So shouldn't you appreciate the fact that these people are getting paid to stay at home, and then because you need to work, you need to eat? And they went, well, yeah, but the thing is with international students, we pay to come here to study. We pay taxes. We have to pay super. They get it with them when they go now. But now you're telling me that they're getting paid and we should appreciate the fact that they're getting paid to stay home. Well, that's just saying that, what are we? Are we cash cows? We just come here to pay and pay and pay some more. And I said to my marketing students, so if you're looking at going back, don't the cafes and that, when they reopen, aren't they going to need to relaunch? Or they're going to tell your customers, you're going to set up online ordering systems? And I started teaching them that. But that caused a conflict of interest, because I was actually doing real-world training, getting them to do their assignments on real-world businesses. Yeah. And I actually got told that I had to stop running these programs outside of the college, even though the college told me to do it, because it was a conflict of interest, because my Cert 4 marketing students were getting the skills they needed to get a work visa, a 4-year work visa, so they weren't signing up for the diploma. So this is sort of where it's when you're I guess a product of your own success, and you're doing real world training, and the industry is not set up to cope with those sorts of people. This is where you go, well, I'm in the wrong industry. Right. I need to go out there and look at changing what I'm doing. So
now that COVID's all done, I think it's all done. Has the business increased? I would guess exponentially, because now, even though you were still geared up to do these diplomas in leadership and marketing, etc., you could do them remotely. Do you now find that students are now saying, well, hang on, if we could do this remotely, we might as well stay remote? Or do you think that they're actually now coming back and they're starting to fly back and utilising, the skills workshop that you have? What are you finding there?
Well, I mean, this is the thing, is they allowed, because they didn't have backpackers and things like that, they allowed the international students to work more than 20 hours a week, which was what they're limited to as well. Right. So for the poor uni students that are paying $40,000 a year and they can only work 20 hours a week, when COVID hit and their money wasn't coming in from back home, which is basically how they do it, they then had to go out and work more. So it was like, it was great, but then when did they get time to do their assignment work? So that's why I was getting them to, they were getting jobs at cafes and all this. They were actually using the fact that they were doing a course and they were doing their assignment on this particular cafe to get a job, and they were getting jobs as supervisors then, not just as a barista or a waiter or something like that. And they were doing the marketing for the cafe and all this sort of thing. So I sort of went, well, if I'm teaching international students to do this, wouldn't it be easier for Australians to or citizens or people that are already entrenched in the culture to actually start up businesses. And when I started talking to people, and it's, oh yeah, but it's too hard, and it costs $5,000 for a website and all this sort of thing. Yeah. And I went, but there's a lot of free options. Now, I'm not saying that it's not worth paying that for an e-commerce website. Yeah, it is. But a lot of friends of mine were giving me a lot of free advice on that to my students, specifically because I would only use the free stuff. So marketing agencies don't use the free stuff, so they don't know what it can do. So when they get a client that when COVID hit and they wanted to cut back on costs and all this sort of stuff, they were coming to me and saying, well, so what can this free things do, or can you actually do work for me? And I went, yeah, but how about let's do a deal. You're developing all this software. As soon as someone says to me, oh yeah, can you show me how to use this plugin, or I want to get this software and or CRMs, whatever, I'll send them back up to you and send clients back up to you if you send people back down to me that can't afford it. So what happened in COVID is that all of a sudden all these people couldn't afford it, so they're sending me all these people to help. And now after COVID, they're all coming back going, oh yeah, I want to do this, and I'm sending them back up to them. And this is what Dennis and I do really well, is that we go, well, maybe I'm not the best person to help you, but we got a mate,
Yeah,
and
that's it.
It was like that, professional speaker development summit. Now, I'm not a professional speaker, but I was organising that. And there was 10 people that I knew on the network, and you were one of them. You were actually the first one that put your hand up and said, yeah, I'll do a talk at that. No talk about money. When you're, talking to professional speakers about doing a gig, what's the first thing they do?
Yeah, I want to know how much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So all of them just went, they said, yes, I'll turn up. I even had Mark Radcliffe from Mr. Wed Training.
Oh, yeah.
That was going to come over from the US, and he just happened to be, I told him it was on, and he said, well, are you looking for someone to do a keynote speaker? And then when I got him on board, I got all these other people. But I had 10 different people, and this was right just before COVID hit.
That's right.
And it was actually the first week after lockdowns that we did such a good job of organising it with the people and that sort of thing. Half of them pulled out, and it was always going to be that if we changed over half of the people, then we'd already sold some tickets. So from a consumer point of view, I went, well, it's a totally different event if we changed half the speakers.
Yeah.
But people were still willing to come along. People were still willing to speak. We did change over half the speakers, so that's why we cancelled it. But QUT, where we're holding it, the Queensland government were all saying, no, we want this event to go ahead. They were going to give me the 500-seat auditorium basically for nothing, because we could only fit 85 people in there, but we could still hold an event. And when we cancelled it, they just went, well, crap, Then QUT said, well, if we, we've got to cancel our classes and live stuff and all this sort of thing. But the personal effect on that, on me getting attacks from people that saying, oh, it's irresponsible, it's running it. And you were the one that actually alerted me to this COVID is going to be a real problem. And as a professional speaker, you said, look, I can't come and do this event just in case this is going to happen. But this is because you've been doing this for 30 years. Yeah. So this is where I was I'd been organising events and all this sort of stuff, but even so, I've been doing it for 20 years. I'm still going to go to people like you that have got the experience, and Dennis and all this sort of stuff. And this is what getting back to, roundabout sort of way, for the 17-year-old kids that are listening out there, this is where people that are your parents' age aren't all going to act like your parents. They're at the stage where they're in a similar situation to you, and they're going to be looking to give advice. But the problem is, if we've given free advice, is 99% of the people don't do it. And this is what Gary Vee said. He started his business because he just got sick of giving out free advice and people weren't doing it. So he just went, I'm going to build a business around the 1% that do it and are willing to pay me for it.
Yeah.
And that's how he started his business, giving away free advice. Another friend of mine, Janine Vosper, that she was going home complaining to her husband. She was telling me in one of the coffee chats that I did with her that, she's giving all this free advice away, and her husband said, well, but did they ask you? And she went, well, I can see his point there. So how do people ask you for advice? Well, if you're a coach, they pay you.
Yeah.
And you don't support small businesses by asking them to do stuff for free.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that these days, a lot of people get that. The thing is, the question is, when they say they can't afford you, people go, well, I'm not going to cheapen my services. You know, this is what it's worth. This is what I know what my value is. But they don't say, well, how much can you afford? Yeah. And then they've got two choices. They can have a discounted product to bump them back to, keep them in the system. Well, for that amount, I can do this, this and this. But I'll be honest with you, I don't think it's going to work, because after we do that, you need to also do this and this, and you can't afford to do that. So let's have a look at that, see if it works, see if you can, see how your business is going, see if you can save up that, and we'll put you on a payment plan. And when COVID hit, everyone started to pull all their customers in, and they were selling them shit that they didn't need, and all the rest of it there as well, because they were trying to hold on to customers so much, which when you think about it, this is what a lot of charities do as well. They don't, they get the donations and that sort of thing, and they hold it in. Now, if you don't have to go out of your way to help people, you can help more people. So this is where I go, well, I'm not the best person to help them, but Gerald is, and I'll put them in contact with you, and they go to you, and then you go, oh, well, this is what I do. Now, you know what you do. You can say, oh, well, I can coach on this. But when they start saying, oh, yeah, what else you need? Can I do this with you? Can I do this with you? You're going to go, no, that's not what I do.
Not my thing.
Yeah. But there's people out there that, I understand that they need customers, but they chase the 20% that cause 80% of your problems. Now, that's not financially viable, because when you start attracting those people and you get testimonials from them, all of a sudden they become 25% of your customers, and 100% of your problems come from those 25%, which means you can't look after the 75% that don't have an issue. So what are they going to do if they're not getting attention, in the off chance that they may need to talk to you or something like that, and you don't have time? And it's not about who you say yes to, it's probably more about who you say no to when you're starting a business.
We are here with Brett O'Connor from Inception Training. And don't forget, if you want to ask Brett any questions, feel free to put it in the chat box and we can bring that up. Now, you also mentioned a couple of names, and I think we should be able to give them a bit of kudos with that. So you mentioned Dennis Hall. Yep. So Dennis Hall is the owner of the Business Small Business Expo, or the owner of... Well, he's the guy that wrote the book.
It was the Small Business Expo. Started by Paula Brand on the Gold Coast.
That's correct. Yeah,
did a wonderful job. Yep. Starting up, did what she had to do. Yep. Dennis has come in and does things differently. But it's a different story. And I know when you're taking over a business, from my franchising days, we used to increase the sales by 10% just by putting up an under new management sign, because all the people you pissed off come back to check you out.
That's true.
So that was something was always going to happen. But what it was coming out of the struggles that Dennis has faced, and I've said this to friends of Paula's, that if Paula was still running it, I think she sort of fell over the line, and it was a time for her to sell. She did a great job, but it was so efforting, and the amount of effort Dennis has had to put in to get it going is just a testament to the bloke himself. When we had the expo last Thursday, it was more like a relief. We just wanted to get the first one done.
True.
So now we're meeting tomorrow about the next one on the 22nd of August. And it's just, guys like that are the people you want to hang around with. Now, why has he got me into helping? Well, because I've been through the job seeker network and all this sort of thing. I understand them. I know how they think. You look at me, how I'm dressed here. This is underdressed for a business networking group. But when you go into Centrelink, how do you see people dressed? Now, I'm probably overdressed for our conversation.
Probably.
But it's about being approachable to them as well. Now, if I'm wearing a business shirt and all this sort of thing, job seekers are going to say, well, you're maybe one, I can't afford you, can't afford to talk to you. And secondly, what sort of empathy do you have for my situation?
The other person that you mentioned was Janine Vosper, who's got a wonderful business in public speaking.
Yep, it's Speech Perfect,
Speech Perfect. And so for those people who want to just have a look at those people, you can just jump onto Speech Perfect and you see Janine there. She was also a great sponsor and supporter of the expo that was on last Thursday. So what I want to ask you, in thinking about the education side, I read an article yesterday who was handed to me by a colleague of ours. We won't mention him, but you may have seen it on LinkedIn. And he said he's over the learning styles. Learning styles are dead. They don't work. So there are the different types of auditory, visual, learning style. The V, what does that stand for? VAK. V stands for visual, audio, and kinesthetic. There you go. There we go. So my brain clicking in. And then you've also got the left brain, right brain, and you've got the speak with, the facilitation, the question asking, the Socrates method. There are so many different styles. So his question is that AI are now coming in, and AI should be able to have a learning style that is geared towards Brett, or the learning style geared towards Gerald. I want to ask you, what do you think about learning styles?
Well,
is that such a thing?
It's something that if you do the Certificate for in Learning Design and Facilitation, there you go, Kerry, another plug.
Another one.
Adam, that was on yesterday.
Day before.
Day before, yeah. Well, you'll learn that learning styles, preferential learning styles particularly, are basically been debunked more than 10 years ago.
Right.
But 75% of vet trainers still think that they exist, and they still teach it in the TAE. What it is, it's actually a style of delivery. So it's more so for instructional designers. Right. But what it does do, it's more like a placebo effect where it eliminates the stress, because the human body can't learn when it's under too much stress. So a lot of people come into or triggered into doing training because they're under a stressful situation, new job, losing their job, money's short. When money's in short supply, your IQ drops by 14 points. I know that from a TED talk, but but they just happen to do that research on cane farmers, which my dad was a cane farmer.
So can you just hang on, just go through that statistic again? What was that statistic that you just brought up?
There's a guy that did a TED talk, and they did research on cane farmers that they were looking into why people that are in financial difficulty tend to make what's perceived as poor decisions, basically. And they related that to, they did IQ tests on them. And I know you spoke about it, and you understand IQ. Emotional intelligence is a different story, and there's a lot of misconceptions in that. And this is where there is an emotional quotient, which is more to do with cognitive empathy, which I think John said, is cognitive empathy really empathy? And this is where it comes into that with machine learning. Yes, they can have cognitive empathy, but they don't have the other forms of empathy, which is like perspective taking. They can take an average. It's basically like ChatGPT is doing what it spits out is the winner of a popularity contest.
Correct, yeah.
So it's like a reality TV show telling you what to do.
Yeah.
Not an expert, because it's just taking the stuff from everywhere. The other issue is it's got issues with currency. Now it'll get better at looking at current events and current affairs, but it still takes time to actually average out and mediate what these popular views are. The thing with ChatGPT is they're personalising it. It apologises to you when it says the wrong thing when you correct it. It's a conversation method. It's more so a translator between computers and humans, which is essentially, that's what people with personal skills like dentists, that's what they do. They're basically translating how the thinkers think and how the action takers think, and actually working out what are their capabilities. And that's the leadership quality now that they're trying to get into leaders. And that's why they talk about leadership needing empathy. You need prospective empathy in sales, because how do you resonate with them? When you resonate with someone, when you're a salesperson, they've already bought the idea of buying from you. It just comes into what can they afford. Yeah. And this is what I was saying before. It's not this is what the price is. It's like, what can you afford right now? And with Afterpay and all this sort of stuff, credit cards and all that sort of thing, people are wary about that sort of debt. But if you get true empathy, you also get empathic joy. If you fix the customer's problem, it doesn't matter if they buy from you or someone else, as long as their problem's fixed, you're happy for them. And this is where people that aren't happy for them because they went with someone else, then I don't see them as them being their customer.
Yeah.
Because if they're not happy for them, they went to someone else. This person, what are they going to do? The post-purchase experience. If you're happy, oh, yeah, that's great, but if you have any other problems, come back to me. But if you go, oh, well, yeah, but that's not an inferior product and you're grouchy or something like that, they're not going to come back to you the next time they have a problem.
Yeah.
So when you're looking at the lifetime value of the customer, this is where people will do that if they've got empathy, and they'll go, yes, I've known this person for 35 years, but I'm not not going to talk to them again because they forgot to tell me something. But in business, people don't do that, and they tend to get people in that aren't their customers, and they start chasing the 25% that cause 100% of their problems, and that's when they start to go broke. But that's easier said than done, because at the end of the day, that 25% could be the difference between saving your business and getting money coming in, or not getting any money coming in. So
I could do a quick Google search right now and have a look at, so I want a training organisation that was going to help me out on, my leadership skills, my empathy skills, or any sort of skills that I want. What are your strengths? So I know this is always a hard question when you ask a person, so what are you good at? Where does Brett O'Connor's strengths lie? And it's not an interview, by the way.
Yeah.
This is just, I'm sure we've all got some good strengths. I'm a producer, as you can see. I know how to push buttons.
Yeah, don't you have a shirt to the contrary?
I've got I do. We'll talk about that. But where do your strengths lie? Where are you best at? When do you perform at your best?
Well, this is where I look at my expertise. People say, what's your expertise? And it's not in training, it's in skills recognition. So you've got to be able to do that on yourself. You've got to be self-aware enough. So I'm a thinker.
Okay.
And this is when we were looking at doing the expos this year, I looked at my own skills model and broke it down into, you need a thinker, an action taker, and a people person. And that's where Dennis and I was the thinker. The strategy, critical thinker, this sort of stuff. Problem solving is actually an action skill. Communication's an action skill.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's where it come down to, ChatGPT can help me write my blog so it can communicate. You can also do that with people with autism that are, and introverts, that they're overthinkers.
Okay.
So when I'm talking to Janine, who's an action taker, she's also got strategy skills and this sort of stuff. Like, these guys are operating at what would be level 3, expert level on my, skills assessment. You got capable, proficient, and expert. Now, there's 2 other levels above it. It's based on the QTAC, areas, but it's mapped to the vocational qualifications, that core skills for work that's in there. So I'm looking at this stuff and I'm designing an instructional design and, going to build these skills. But this is where I've found that where I have, a strength is joining the dots between something all the way over here and how is it connected to there and what are the steps to get there and that sort of thing. Now, this is something where if you're talking to someone and you're saying, business coaches are basically gaslighters, but it's in a positive sense.
Yeah.
But when you get one that's doesn't have the person's best interests at heart, people will resist and they'll knock back. And then the next person they go along to, they when they work it, they feel like they're being manipulated or something like that. They're going to go back into their shell, once bitten, twice shy. So a lot of people come to me now and say, what's your, what are you known for? What are your strengths? And it's like, well, I'm known for giving away work and saying, no, I think this person's better to help you. But what they would say is, well, you're good at the strategy and all this sort of stuff. You're just not good at the execution. And that's probably right. I'm good at coming up with all these great things, but they're too complicated for, I say, normal people to get. Now, this is where it comes into with ChatGPT and this sort of stuff. This is where I've been able to put in, and you ask it the question, what are 10 ways to do this? And it comes up with the popular options. Now, out of that, I can pick the top 3 or the 3 that I think are the best and okay and the worst option. And this is where it comes into that I'm finding that when I'm talking about skills recognition and things like that with people, this is where it's come into that people are going, wow, how do you do this? And, they're asking me, am I autistic or a savant or something like this sort of thing? And I'm like, well, no, I'm just taking a guess.
Right.
But it's close enough. It's a close enough guess that people think, "Wow, this guy's psychic," or Mel Belmont says, "I'm empathic." And to me, that's sort of where it comes into. When I was at school, I remember in year 10, they were going to hold me back in year 10 because I was having trouble at school. You asked about what I was like at school. They actually sent me away to get this test done. And under one, I forget the different ones they do, there was things, but one of them was comprehension. And it didn't have a score, it just had beyond ceiling.
Beyond
ceiling.
Okay.
So beyond the ceiling of the test,
yeah.
as a 14-year-old kid.
Yeah.
And this is where it's coming back to. They sent that back, and my dad went in, being a farmer, and told them, this guy's, it's not that he's stupid, it's just he doesn't see why it's relevant to him. And he knows that he can get away with it. He knows there's nothing you can do that can make him do it. So what did they do? Well, they put me into in maths in year 8, I think it was. They dropped me down from intermediate to the basic level 1, and the teacher was also my PE teacher. So what would he do is that if I played up in the maths class, he would make me run around the oval in gym class. So, but then he, I got 98% in the general maths.
Right.
And he said to mum and dad in front of me at the thing, I could put him back up into Leo's class, but at the end of the day, he's not going to do the work. So how about I keep him down with me and I'll just give him extra work so that when he goes up to year 10, well, this was year 9 at this stage, when he goes up to year 10, he's not going to be behind when he goes into intermediate maths. So what did they do? They gave me the class that was run by the captain coach of the Lennox Head football team because they knew that I wasn't going to work for him. One of those, Clint Eastwood sort of guys, that sort of thing. Yeah. Knowing that I come from, a farming family and all this sort of stuff. And they just said to me back then, well, he just doesn't react well to women. I had a male English teacher. Next year they put me with 2 female teachers and I got 19% in English in year 11 and then turned that around because they changed the teachers, whatever, and got a good score, good enough to get into teachers college. But the thing is that same maths teacher that identified early that I wasn't going to do the work until I was, working with him, I had him in year 11 and 12 for maths. Now, this is where people go on about, teachers and all this sort of stuff. And this was a guy that at the time there was no computers, but what he had was this little book, and he used to mark whether or not people did their homework or not. And the last day of college, of high school, the last homework assignment, he's got this big smile on his face. Why? Have you done your homework? And I said no. And you've never seen someone that's so happy, or a teacher so happy to hear that you haven't done your homework. And he's just gone, well, that's amazing. He said, do you realise in the last 2 years you have done your homework exactly 50.0% of the time?
Right.
And he's like, did you plan that? Mate, you think I planned that? Anyway, Mum was walking across the courtyard to tuck shop duty. So he opens the window and goes, 50%. He'll tell you about it when he gets home. And people go, oh, yeah, that's the thing. But when you have a relationship like that with a teacher, this is where, that's what I remember from my schooling years. Now, who's that guy? Well, he went on to become the headmaster of Morris Brothers Ashgrove here.
Okay.
So, this is where it comes into when you get people that are actually interested in people and treat them like human beings, you know that 20 years, 30 years down the track, A, they're going to remember you, and secondly, that they're not going to remember how you treated them or the customer service or anything. They're going to remember how you made them feel.
Yeah.
Now, he didn't make me feel like shit because I'd done my homework 50% of the time. And the irony is I actually won a car in a raffle and he had to present it to me a couple of years later after I left. But he then went on and he went himself and he went, yeah, you know what, I'm going to have the confidence to apply for these job roles. So out of doing that and having that relationship with me, there's a lot of stuff that we joke about that I don't want to say because, he'd probably get put in jail if he did that, the jokes and that sort of thing we used to have with him. But he treated people like a human being. Where did that come from? When he left teachers college, The kids used to have a nickname. They called him Smiley because he was told that when you go in there, don't smile and don't show a sense of humour. And one of the kids called him Smileys to his face, and he basically almost grabbed him and was ready. Don't you call me Smiley again, and all this sort of stuff. And he had to think about it. And he went, this isn't right. This is not the way to do it. And this would have been like 50 years ago. So I hear a lot of people go on about, they talk about skills, but an intelligent fool can make something more complicated than it needs to be. And I think that that's probably what's going on with the education system. Okay. Do you need to know how the engine works to drive a car?
No.
Well, some people think you do. Why? Because then you can drive the car better. But why do first-year medical students get sick every day of the week? Because they're told about all these symptoms and all this sort of stuff and they start to look for it. So why don't we just say these are what the kids' strengths are and these are what the people's strengths are and these are what the old people's strengths are. I say old people, you and me, old white guys, what are our strengths, Yes, like that lady that said, you're a white guy, so you're racist. And it's like, yeah, okay, I'll admit that. What's next?
Right, yeah.
And this is the thing. It's like, okay, you win.
You win.
What's next? And this is where I think that people struggle with that because they go, okay.
What is next?
Yeah. And that's where a lot of people that are in their 50s, I think they're at that stage where they're going, okay, yeah, so I'm right. Yeah, I don't want to do this anymore. But they don't know what else they want to do. So it's not that they know they want to leave, but they don't know what they want to do. And that's pretty well the situation that the kids leaving school are in these days as well. So.
Well, I'll tell you, Brett, I wish we had a little bit more time. We've just gone like 50 minutes. It goes pretty quick when you're sitting in the hot lounge there. I just wish I had given you more time to speak. I know I interrupted a lot.
Yeah, I know. And, well, it's kind of like I'm kind of like Donkey from Shrek. It's not getting me to talk. It's getting me to shut up. That's the trick. So
is that the trick? Have you had fun?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
I've been trying to get you on the couch here forever, and it's been such a long time to get you here. But I finally got you here, wrangled you in, and you made it within 4 minutes. I think that's the most important thing.
That's probably the reason why we haven't been able to get together. You with your ADHD and me with my,
OCD.
Can't get my shit together.
Yeah, and going above the comprehension ceiling and all that sort of stuff. Yeah,
so
I don't know.
I understand what's going on. It's just that's not enough motivation for me to do something like that. Yeah. But in my defence, people that are traditionally late are also more likely to stop and help in an emergency. So I sort of
and
said
that's
that
what you did. You did. You came here and you said it was your neighbour who had a little bit of an emergency.
Well, they don't speak English, and you think a guy that would teach international students, but they spoke no English.
Yeah.
I think she wanted to cut the dragon fruit on my side of the fence, but I'll find out when I get home. But yeah. So
well, as usual, it's always good talking to you, and it's great catching up with you last Thursday at the Expo, and we wish everyone well. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining us here. If you want to send Brett a quick message, where can they find you, mate? Where can they easily find you?
Well, you can jump on inception.net.au, and that's, the movie. Sounds like a movie, so that's why it's called the Inception Network, because inception.com.au was taken.
Oh, true, okay.
so
inception.net.au, and they'll be able to see
Inception Network Australia, so I just made the business name out of that.
Nice and easy. Mate, great to have you on here. We'll talk later.
All right, thanks,
See you later. Bye, everyone. Bye.